Brothers and sisters, peace be with you.
and with your spirit.
In the flyer sent to you, Sister Gade quoted the USCCB on our topic tonight, saying that racism is evil because it attacks the inherent dignity of the human person, created in the image and likeness of God. The persistence of racism demands our attention now. It's never too late. Racism emerges in the actions and inactions of individuals, as Sister Gid mentioned, sins of omission rather than sins of commission. Now, responding to the call to action against racism, the Filipino Corsillo community decided to invite Father Leo Edgerly Jr. to speak to us, inform and enlighten us on the social justice issue and how we should respond to it as people of color ourselves and as Catholics and as Corsilistas. We feel that we cannot be passive spectators in this inherently evil attack on human dignity. Father Leo has experienced being profiled as a youth growing up in West Oakland, like many other black men. In the early 1970s, he could recall, and I quote, almost always being stopped by the police for driving in San Leandro or El Cerrito when he was not violating any traffic rules. He is in the best position to tell us about this issue, not just from the catechetical point of view, but also from a first person account. It is for this reason that Father Leo serves as a member of the Bishop's Task Force on Racism and recognition of what he can contribute to the group. Father Leo said that he does not have all the answers about race in the community, but we must talk about it and listen to one another even if we don't agree. This is the first step in seeing what the problem is before we can make a judgment and take action. That is, see first, judge, and then act. And so, brothers and sisters, I'm pleased to present to you Father Leo.
Thank you, Deacon. De Coloris, everyone.
Colores.
It's good to be with you. Before I take care get into the focus of my sharing with you this evening, can I touch bases with Celso and Clarita? Celso, I see you up there in my corner. How are the kids? Can somebody put Celso on?
Thanks for unmuting me. I couldn't speak earlier because I'm muted, Father. Actually, Claricel and her son, Kingston, is with us now. They just came last night.
Well, give them my love, okay?
Yeah, I think Claricel will. We ask her to also to join us.
Yeah.
In her laptop.
Well, I'd love to see them. So
I don't know
anyway,
if she got the invite.
let me then tell everybody I said hi in the family.
Yeah, well, I will. I will also to Cyrus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for inviting me to share with you this evening. What I'd like to do, I think the introduction was excellent. I'm going to share with you a few thoughts that I have, and then what I really would like to do is spend our time together, maybe answering some questions. I'm those of you who know me, you know I'm a former grammar school teacher, and I normally, if we were here face to face, I would get rid of that. I would be asking you questions and inviting you to ask me questions. So that's how I function best. I want, I think it might be helpful if I started off by just telling you my story. It's not a horrific story of racism, but it's a story that kind of reflects somewhat what the Black experience, at least the Black male experience, is in this country, and my experience as a man who wanted to, from a very early age, felt the vocation to the priesthood. So I was born, as the deacon said, I was raised in West Oakland, went to St. Francis de Sales Grammar School, a very small school. I'm the eldest of 4 children. My 3 siblings and I all attended St. Francis. And in the 3rd grade, I felt that I had a vocation. Now, in retrospect, it was really, I liked the power that the priests had over the nuns. And and I wanted to, I really wanted to get to heaven. And it seemed to me that the best way to get to heaven was to become a priest. So I wasn't a really holy guy, but I wasn't a dumb man, you know. So I was attracted to the priesthood. I didn't mind being an altar boy and any of those things. What I really wanted to do was avoid hell. And so I tested for the seminary in the 8th grade. At that time, we could enter the seminary during our high school years. So it was 1963. As I was graduating from St. Francis de Sales, by that time it was the cathedral parish of the diocese. I did well on my tests. I was always a good student. And the vocation director, a priest named Father Klopper, John Klopper, invited my mom and dad to a meeting. And at the meeting, Father Klopper told my parents that, to paraphrase him, we think that Leo will be happier at Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. The seminary I was applying for was St. Joseph Seminary in Los Altos. That was a seminary for boys and young men who wanted to be priests in San Francisco, the Archdiocese, or the Diocese of Oakland, or Stockton, or Santa Rosa. I had no desire to be a missionary, but they refused to accept me because I was Black. And so they wanted to send me to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Here I am, born and raised in the Bay Area, had never left California, heard horrible stories about the South as it relates to people of color. And but there were 2 seminaries there that accepted Black seminarians. One was the Josephite Seminary that accepted Black boys and men as seminarians if they could pass. And I'm not sure if all of you know what that means. It means that they could pass for someone other than, for some ethnic group other than Black. So my dad, for example, was a Creole. My dad had straight hair. He had anglicized features. You look at my father, you would not necessarily know he was Black. He could pass. So Josephites would not have accepted me because I can't pass. You look at me and you know I'm Black. But there was another seminary there that did accept Blacks, and that was the Divine Word Fathers, the SVDs. And the SVDs were willing to accept Black seminarians at Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, if we agreed to only seek assignments outside of the United States, or in the few parishes that existed in the South that were set aside for Black Catholics. I had no desire, as I said, to be a missionary. I had no desire to function as a priest outside of the United States. I didn't have a desire to function as a priest outside of the Bay Area. So I didn't go. I didn't accept their recommendation. I went to St. Joseph's High School in Alameda. This is the fall of 1963. And when I entered there was only about 5 or 6 Black boys in the school at that time. It was an all-male school. The girls' school was on the other corner, and we did not take classes together. But at St. Joe's in Alameda at that time, African-American males could not take college prep classes. They took general ed classes. So I went to St. Joe's in Alameda. Even though, as I said, I was a good student, I was not allowed to take college prep classes because that, like I said, they had 2 tracks, track for college prep and then the track for general ed. Fortunately for me, the new Bishop of Oakland, Bishop Floyd Began, heard about me, heard about my vocation, and insisted that the seminary take me. So in the fall of 1964, I entered St. Joseph's Minor Seminary as a sophomore in high school. When I got there, I would say for about the first year, year and a half, I might be, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but definitely for the first year, very few of my fellow classmates related to me. There were about 500 of us in the seminary at that time. Those were the days, my friend. So we had a college side. We had the first 2 years of college, freshman and sophomore years of college on one side of the building, and then we had 4 years of high school students on the other side. So I had a class of about 120 guys with my classmates out of 500 guys in the seminary. I was the only Black of the 500 guys in the seminary at that time. And I would say, as I was starting to say, for the first year, a little bit more, no one talked to me with the exception of about 4 guys. There was no racial epithets. There were no racist statements. It was as if I wasn't there. The guys talked to me only when they had to. And the 4 guys, this is how God works. The 4 guys who befriended me were considered the bad boys in the class. They were the guys who would try to sneak out of their rooms at night, and guys who would throw rocks at birds and things like that. These are the guys that befriended me. I laugh when I think about it. But eventually, my classmates came around. I was a good student. And in the seminary, and this is still true, if a student succeeds academically, he can gain the respect of the guys. So I was pretty good academically, especially in the subject areas of history and language arts. So eventually the guys began to befriend me, accept me. And I have to say that some of those guys actually are, we're talking what, 50 plus years ago? My gosh, that's so scary when you say that. Some of those guys are still my closest friends, but it took a while. And I'm sharing this with you because when we think of racial injustice, I think it was Deacon who said it. It's not so much sins of action, but rather sins of omission, or maybe that's not even fair to say sins of omission. It's like benign neglect. My classmates in 64, 65, 66, almost all of them were raised in the peninsula, San Mateo, Burlingame, or in the city, Sunset District of San Francisco. They're mainly Irish, Italian Americans, Irish Americans. I don't think I have one Hispanic classmate during my 5 years in the minor. No, I did. I had one Hispanic classmate during my 5 years in the minor seminary. At that time, there were no Filipinos in the minor seminary. So these are guys who didn't have any animosity towards me. They had just never been around Black people, and they knew we were different, and so they just kind of shied away. So the term I use is benign neglect. As I said, as we got to know each other, I became close with a number of my classmates. And but at the same time, the civil rights movement was kicking in. We had the civil rights movement of 64, 65. We had a number of riots in the United States. So the country became much more aware of racial discrimination, racial injustice. For me, it was a difficult time because the training that I was receiving in the seminary was excellent in terms of academic training, but I felt that the training I was receiving was really preparing me to minister primarily in a white middle class parish. My assumption was that if I were to get ordained, my original ordination class was 1975, that if I were to get ordained, I was probably going to be assigned to a primarily, if not all Black parish, and I felt the seminary was not preparing me for that experience. When I would come home during the summer for my summer vacations, it wasn't unusual when I answered the phone. Let's say the phone would ring, I answer the phone. People would, folks on the other end of the phone would sometimes hang up, and then they call back. I answered it again, and they said, "Oh, I thought I had the wrong number. You sound white." Now, believe me, in the 60s, if you were African American male, you did not want to sound white. And so I asked for permission to leave the seminary. I wanted to go to Cal. I wanted to major in psychology. This is my, this is the, as I was going into my junior year of college. So I had been in the minor seminary for 5 years. I asked for permission to leave. The bishop said no. Bishop again said no. I quit, went to Cal, studied psych, graduated from Cal in 1971, and with no intentions of ever returning to the seminary. But God had plans for me that I was not fully aware of. Surprise, surprise. And I've told this story before. I'm digressing a bit, but it's an important part of my story. As I was graduating from college in 1971, my dad and mom had bought me a Firebird Pontiac. I love cars. And this Firebird was so fast. It was so cool. And so my dad asked me to do him a favor. You know, mom had just bought me a car, so how could I say no? And he said, "I want you to make a cursillo." And I'm saying, "Dad, you know," at that time, I didn't even believe in God. I didn't tell my dad that, but I didn't believe in God. The thought of a cursillo, what was it? 3 nights, you know, and, you know, go in on a Thursday. And well, it was Labor Day weekend. So we went in on a Friday. We weren't going to get off until Monday. And I was the only young Black person there. I was 22 years old. And aside from my dad and Deacon Morris Soublé, well, he wasn't a deacon then, but my dad and Morris Soublé and John Maxwell, who was my pastor, it was only 3 of us who were Black. And I raised holy hell doing that cursillo. I knew just enough to be disruptive. And my dad kept telling the team, after we went to bed, "Don't worry, Leo will come around, he'll come around." And it just so happened that we had our cursillo at St. Louis Bertrand in East Oakland. And the pastor was a priest named Father Ralph Brennan. And Ralph passed through just to greet us. And Ralph and I knew each other from my seminary days. And Ralph asked me what I was going to do. I was supposed to go to law school. I had been accepted at Bolt. I told Ralph I was going to delay for a year and then make some money and then enter, hopefully reapply for Cal, for Bolt Hall in the fall of 1972. So Ralph said, you know, told me that they were looking for a teacher. And they needed a 5th grade teacher. I told Ralph I had no desire to teach, but that was the end of the conversation. Fast forward, Monday, Labor Day, I had made a deal with my dad that I could leave the cursillo early. So I left the cursillo at lunchtime.